I have been I have a advanced hypnotherapy
Oh, excellent.
degree
Mm.
since 1992. I received
Wow.
it from the Hypnodyne Foundation here in Florida,
Mm.
and I've been dealing with hypnotic techniques real quiet, don't let it, but for the benefit of
Yeah.
people. I call it biopsychic analysis this time. I coined my own way of doing what we call analysis. They would call it, doctors would call it. Did you go and get yourself a analysis, or I forgot what they call that, where they look you over and tell you, what's wrong with you, prognosis, all of those.
Hmm.
Um, I went by I had to go back into the 90s and into my information.
Hmm.
I used during the time I was practicing, or at least learning, the techniques of hypnotherapies under the Erickson techniques. I dealt with what was actually the government's definition of hypnotherapy or hypnosis. It says the bypass of the critical factor, that is the
Yeah.
critical mind and thinking, essentially that blocks and defends you against what you can then discern as good or bad.
Hmm.
And the other part too to that is the establishment of acceptable selective thinking. The establishment of acceptable selective thinking, which means that uh, you have to place a seed into the subconscious mind while
Hmm.
bypassing the conscious mind
Hmm.
and not making that part of the subconscious mind feel, because the subconscious mind is unconditional.
Hmm.
It doesn't care about good or bad.
Hmm.
It just takes in information, and based upon the influence of that information and the repetition of that information, then the subconscious mind now feeds that consistently back to the conscious mind.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
so what to me hypnosis is, bypassing and subverting the protective layers that the conscious mind puts into place in order to defend a person's what we call comfort zone.
Hmm. Mm. Okay, very interesting. So you bypass the conscious mind. So I hear about hypnosis and I hear about people saying that the best time to practice hypnosis, some people say is right before sleep.
Yeah,
Because you're in a you're in a very suggestive state. Can you
yeah,
talk to me about that time before sleep when we could do some
yeah.
reprogramming?
Indeed, because the brain wants to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
The brain is doing everything it can to have the body has exhausted itself of fuel.
Mm-hmm.
The brain essentially, especially during the daytime hours, the
Mm-hmm.
brain overworks itself in problem solving, going through its own thoughts and inventory, and having a problem with whatever it is it feels it has to have a problem to solve.
Mm-hmm.
The best people that would be hypnotized are people who go to bed with unsolved problems. They
Mm-hmm.
tend to be extremely suggestible because their mind is always looking for solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So you can place something in there that can subvert any kind of critical analysis of what it is that that person is actually trying their best to find an answer to.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part that leads to is an aspect of subconscious hypnotism called somnambulism.
Mm-hmm.
Somnambulism and cramp. You ever notice people who say that that aliens visited them and they couldn't move?
Mind, is it infinite consciousness? Is it super consciousness? What would you describe that as, the subconscious mind, so we could get more comfortable with talking to it, I guess.
Yeah, that's the meditative mind, we call it. That's the
Mm,
mind that is open and is the doorway and the threshold towards the God mind.
mm,
In other words, it's the portal that we use between the superconscious mind, the unconscious mind, and the conscious mind.
mm.
So we have a portal essentially a to a place where time doesn't exist,
Mm,
where there is no differentiation between this and that, here
mhm,
and there.
mhm,
And that part of the mind is there to actually open us up to new ways of thinking, to
mhm,
accepting new boundaries for the ways that our thoughts would operate.
mhm,
So if you have a that gray area, it's always good to step into that place and know what that area does and does not do. And which is this is how devious those who control us know about what they know about the subconscious mind. is what gets them to learn the techniques of control so that you have no way of understanding that the thoughts that you're thinking don't belong to you.
Mm,
You see, they have encoded and downloaded through this medium that we're looking at right now.
mm-hmm,
This
mm-hmm.
medium goes right past, especially if you're going to teach or do movies or do things that you want to influence people by. They would completely the conscious mind shuts down when it looks at TV, when it looks at a movie,
Right.
and then what you're doing is downloading suggestions through
Right.
different wordplay,
Uh-huh.
certain ways that you know that you could manipulate a person by making them feel uncomfortable. And
Mm-hmm,
what you're selling is to tell them that they're going to feel comfortable with this.
mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at it, remember, I don't know if you remember back in the day, I used to say when you go to the movie, get yourself a pad and pen.
Yeah, I
And
remember. Yeah, yeah.
instead of you looking at the television or the movie with an uncritical mind, I'm going to be entertained. No, you're going to be entertained.
Mm-hmm,
So what you have to do is not passively look at it. You have to actively look at the
mm-hmm,
television, actively look at the movie screen,
mm-hmm,
actively go into a book, for example, and read it with an active mind so that you don't dismiss the conscious mind while you're downloading. You're filtering at the same time as you're downloading. The critical mind is learning, but understanding essentially what it is learning is nothing more than images that are meant to persuade you.
mm-hmm.
That's the thing about it. Using television medium is the power of persuasion.
Mm,
That's one of the ways of hypnotism to persuade a person that they're safe because normally you're looking at television in your home, so you feel safe.
mm-hmm,
So now the information coming in is not a threat to you. You don't feel threatened because you're in your bed, you're chilling, your mind and your body are telling you, listen, I'm comfortable, everything is all right. I think I'm in charge of whatever it is that's coming in there. But you're downloading, especially children. Children are very susceptible, and you have to watch television, watch what they're watching, listen to that nonsense, that cacophonous noise going on in the head. That's the water that is being used to filter out the crap thoughts that essentially must be deleted. And you can't actually relieve yourself, if you want to call it that, of those thoughts in just one session.
mm-hmm.
It happens over a period of time. The
Okay.
more that you do this, the more that you quote practice, which I don't like to use that word, but the more you practice at using that particular technique of just observing without applying a judgment to the thoughts that come up, the thoughts no longer have priority. And slowly but surely, as you continue to do this, you'll see that those thoughts come in less and less
Unless.
and less. And then all of a sudden, you're in that place. You find out that once you go there, there's nothing, there's emptiness. And that now is true meditation because you have lost your thought process, which is nothing more than uh, the cataloging of all kinds of experiences and nonsense. You've lost access to that and you've gained access to universal intelligence.
Mm, powerful. So, to use an analogy for us to, oh man, I always love when I talk to you, Doc. Make sure y'all sign up to this man's webinar, man. I always love when I talk to Doc. So being an observer of your thoughts, it's hard for a lot of people. They associate themselves with their thoughts. If they, let's say, they have a thought, they walk down a block and something tells them, "Oh man, that lady brushed up against you. You should have hit that old lady when she." And you're like, "Oh my God, I'm a bad person."
Yeah,
So when you have these thoughts, should you like look at your thoughts like, let's say you're tuning a radio station and it's just a radio station, and you should just, it's not you, but you're constantly tuning to different frequency radio stations. So that was just a radio station that you don't want to listen to no more. Can we look at it like that?
that's very interesting. What it is essentially is you casting your attention and your observation into the world of cause and effect.
Uh,
So when I say, oh, that person hit me, now you have placed whatever damage you feel was done to you on something outside of yourself and you've given it life in the world that gives life to your thoughts.
mhm,
Now, if your observer were to say, oh, that person hit me, and instead of saying, I blame that person for whatever I'm feeling, you stop for the moment and then look at, there's your mirror magic.
Mm-hmm.
Bring that particular thought and observation back to the originator of that thought.
Mm-hmm.
So now your observation no longer goes into the realm where you have karma that is working around that particular
Mm-hmm.
perception that you're dealing with. Because the karma comes from you assigning blame
Mm-hmm.
and putting your consciousness outside into the world of karma.
Mm.
When you do self examination, now that thought comes back to you. And now you are no longer dealing with the illusion that somehow that person had some kind of applied guilt that you have to say was guilty of something. You no longer have to do that because now you're looking at the originator of that particular thought and not casting the blame on that person outside of you for the thought that you're having. And when you no longer look at the person outside of yourself as the one to blame for the thoughts that you're having, now the thought comes back to you for self analysis. Why
Mm-hmm.
did I think that?
Mm-hmm.
What was that about? Why did I feel that I need to use that little encounter as something that I need to build outside of myself so that I can have a scratching post or some kind of uh, uh, what is it, scapegoat in order to cast all my sins into? No, that once that happens, you don't create thoughts on the outside that eventually become your karma.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you keep casting yourself outside and blaming everybody outside of yourself, and you keep this, and this is personal.
Yeah.
This is in your personal periphery. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not talking about the evil that you face with everybody else. Racism and all the kind of BS that you're dealing with outside. I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about your own personal peace.
Mm-hmm.
If you are casting your feelings that somehow you are a victim of people or that person on the outside, then you have created something on the outside that will need nurturing, and you'll find yourself consistently looking outside of yourself. But when it comes turned back to you, you know that the originator of that feeling, once that person is gone about their business and don't even think twice about you, that person also disappears from your mind.